promoting businesses and organizations to help them reach their full potential. Lighten the path to the success of your business. Enhancing the lives of our listeners by talking about things that matters most. Helping you to shine your light emotionally, mentally, spiritually, socially, and physically. Spreading positive vibes. You've got it locked and you're listening to Lyte Vibrations, brought to you by Lyte Communications right here on CBN Radio 90.9 FM. And now your host and our director, Natasha Letza.
Hello, you've got it locked in. You're chilling with your girl, Tasha T here, bringing to you another episode of Lyte Vibrations. Returning with us in the studios, we have Dr. June Samuel, and she's a coordinator for the Mental Health and Psychosocial Support Project, which is being sponsored by the Ministry of Health and Social Development, the Pan American Health Organization, and the BVI Health Services Authority. Welcome back to the program, Dr. Samuel.
Thank you, Natasha.
Now, for the past few shows, we've been talking a lot about, Irma and Maria. And we have another crisis on our hands. We have this whole COVID-19 drama. I'm going to call it a drama because that is what it is. So, associated with all the drama about COVID and lockdowns and social distancing, mask wearing, and now we have the vaccination. All of this, it has to have some form of mental anxiety. So let's talk about some of the mental health issues arising or that have arisen as a result of the pandemic.
So, you're making me smile about how you state this thing. But anyway, so as it relates to the pandemic, so initially, so this is last year, because we're now about a year and a little bit into the pandemic. And initially there was a lot of fear, a lot of concerns, a lot of anxiety associated with this new emerging disease that nobody was sure exactly what it was, what the effect would be, what outcome was going to be. And of course, associated with it were all the changes that we had to make. So, the changes in terms of the public health measures, the social distancing, not being able to go by family, all of those changes. So those were all associated with a high level of anxiety in the population, the fearfulness around, catching the virus and dying, as well as all the changes. So essentially, persons were under much more stress than usual. So initially, from a mental health perspective, we would say that persons were having like an acute stress response to this whole change in situation. Of course, time has gone on, and there's a lot more that we now know, and we've made some strides in terms of COVID-19, but there continues to be a lot of uncertainty. So a year later, we're now, today even, the whole thing of the mutations of the virus and the variants and the challenges that is now looking to create has the potential now to create another scenario that will make persons even more anxious and worried, because that is now within a context of we have vaccines that we know work, but now we have variants and we're not so sure the vaccines will work against all of these variants. So a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, and of course the socioeconomic changes in all of our countries, has impacted individuals from a financial perspective. So, cost of living has changed, persons have lost jobs, and so there's much more happening that is creating a lot of stress and anxiety in our environment.
Hence the word drama.
No, well, that's a perspective. Maybe that helps it to be more positive. I don't know.
Wow. So let's talk about the fear. So fear is something that paralyzes you. Fear is something that makes you give up control to a certain extent. Do you think that, you know, the fear associated with this pandemic and you know, COVID on a whole, do you think, you know, that was an intentional use to get persons to, you know, kind of give up their control to be able to, you'd say, to be able to have, like you said, these certain control measures enacted very seamlessly? And what kind of, you know, effects has that had on persons who, you know, having to give up all this power, you know, these, we could call them alpha persons, you know, the alpha person who always wants to be in charge or whatever, and then they have to give up all this power and basically conform to society. You know, what kind of impact is that having on their mental health?
Well, so that's one perspective, okay, and that can be perspectives that individuals have. The other perspective is, while it may seem as if there may have been fear mongering, because I guess that's what people feel, but the truth is, if you are in any new situation where you are uncertain of what the effects of that situation will be, fear and anxiety is one of the emotions you're going to experience. Okay, so here you have a virus that is new to human beings, wasn't new in the world. So that was one of the conspiracy theories that came out that created the fear, some of the fear. So it wasn't a new virus, but it was a new virus to human beings. And therefore the effects on human beings were not very clear in the beginning, except that what was happening in the beginning was a lot of people were dying from the effects of the virus, from being infected. Okay, so if you see a situation where you have a new organism that's causing a lot of death, that's going to make people fearful. Right? Because the deaths weren't made up. They were on TV every day. You could see the bodies being lined up, right? So all of those happenings in our environment would have gone, and then at the time, of course, there was no, okay, how are we going to get past this? The only thing we knew was you have to be locked down, you have to keep people separate from each other, right? So yes, you have to give up a certain amount of control, but again, that is not new, because public health measures that control people's movements for the benefit of a whole population, that is not a new strategy. We've used that in other diseases as well previously. So I think part of what may have been happening is, you know, you have a whole generation of us who we've never been in a pandemic before. We've never seen an illness at this magnitude before, the effect at this magnitude. And then, of course, we're not all public health specialists. So the laypersons would feel like, you know, this is just a lot of control. But their public health measures, again, they were used previously for other disease, control of other diseases that would have been in the population. So that, to me, the change now, having that change of, you know, moving from being free to move about and do as you know, engage with who you wish, etc., to now having to be controlled. You can't express affection. You can't go to church. It is the change, you know, that creates the stress, right? And then that stress, when we don't manage it, then, you know, increases our levels of anxiety, increases. And of course, if you have anxiety increased, the thoughts that you're going to have are going to be, you know, anxiety will make you think all sorts of things. Okay? So I think it's like it's the perspective on the situation and the way that you deal with the fear. I said on a previous program, you deal with fear by facing the fear. What exactly is it that you're fearful of? Okay? Where can I find the information that helps me to answer those questions? Right? And how do I then use that information to then bring some control over my situation? Because the truth is, in this situation, we have some amount of control, because you could choose to wear a mask or not wear a mask. and then you deal with the consequences. That's still your choice. You know, the government will mandate it, they will insist, but we see how people break the rules all the time because people feel like they should exercise their individual choice. But that's going to have consequences for you, the individual, and for the public at large. And that is why, you know, a public health measure that affects everyone is so important. Okay?
Definitely. And I like the fact that you brought up the point about the variants, right? So we have the vaccine rollout, you know, a lot of people subscribing to the vaccine, a lot of people encouraging other people to, you know, to take the vaccine because they find that it is a way to get us back to some semblance of normalcy. And then, you know, people start taking the vaccine and you hear about a variant. You're not sure if the vaccine you're even taking will be effective against this variant. And, you know, it's back to, you know, you still have these control measures in place. Now, in terms of the fear, you see it, you know, expressed, you know, like you said, in different ways from different people. I know my mom, you know, she's like, I'm staying home, and when I do go out, you know, I'm gonna put on my 2 masks, and you know, she don't want to be around. So you have those people out here. While sometimes I think she over exaggerates. I'm like, Mommy, you really need 2 masks? She's like, yeah, they should put on 2 masks. So it's like anything they say, you know, she taking it as a gospel, you know. And my mother's stubborn. I'm like, Mom, 1 mask is enough, man. You don't think you're overdoing it? Can you even breathe in those masks? She's like, I can do what the people them say because, you know, I gonna keep myself and I gonna make sure, you know. So so you do have, you know, a wide cross section of persons who, you know, because of, like you said, the unknown, and people, you know, a lot of people did die as a result. You have people who will, you know, word for word, verbatim, follow, you know, the advice of the authorities, you know, while the other section of people will, you know, take their chances in, you know, in certain situations. But do you think, as a result of all of that, all of the measures which were designed to keep us safe, do you think as a community here that those measures has kind of shifted the fabric of our community in terms of, you know, going from being a kind of loving, you know, closely knit society into, you know, just, you know, kind of like an antisocial population as a result?
I wouldn't say antisocial, but I would say that there has been a shift. I think the effect and what type of shift it is, we're going to see over the long term. Because of course, you know, we had to engage in measures that makes us more isolated as individuals, makes us less connected. And so, you know, we have to make that extra effort to reach out and connect with persons. And not all age groups would be able to do that because, you know, some persons are shy of the technology. So generally, you know, there's more isolation with people in their spaces. So unless we make a conscious effort to reach out, right? So I may not get to come by your house and see you, but I can pick up the telephone and call. So the question is how much of that effort we're making, and therefore what is the result of that now in terms of our relationships within the society. I think is something that's left to be seen. And of course that goes for the children as well, because, you know, children have had less of social interaction, less of being at school. So, you know, we wonder what in the long term, you know, what is this going to show up like in the long terms in terms of our relationships, our personalities, and just the community as a whole.
Yes. And in your professional capacity, are you seeing more persons who are suffering with, you know, the anxiety related or, you know, the effects basically of COVID?
Interestingly enough, recently I have definitely seen a spike, and you know, my conceptualization of what's happening is that I think for a lot of us psychologically, we lived in a place where, okay, this is soon going to be over, right? And then it kept getting pushed back and kept getting pushed back, and as things keep getting pushed back, then it has an effect on our lives in one way or the next. And so now being a year plus out, I'm starting to see more and more persons who are presenting with, anxieties around their current situation, but just a general sense of fatigue and mental exhaustion around all of the changes, because there's been a lot of changes. I mean, and sometimes so if I mention one, for example, going from having meetings in person to having meetings on Zoom.
Yeah.
Right? And the strain that causes on your body physically, right? Persons may not be aware, but they feel it. And they realize that, okay, yeah, this is having an effect on me, but we may not be connecting that is what it is. And then now, of course, we need to take the next step, because we may continue to be doing this for a little while. So the next step is, I don't know if you remember when cell phones came out, right? And then we had to develop business etiquette around cell phone use. Put your phone on vibrate in a meeting. If you're gonna answer your phone, step outside, these kinds of things. So what's going to be the etiquette now around Zoom meetings, right? How often should you have Zoom meetings? How long should you be on a Zoom meeting? Okay, what kind of break you should take between Zoom meetings? So I think those things, you're going to start to see the evolution of that. But all of these have an effect on our mental health, because it's about change, it's about rapid change, and it's about how do we now adapt to all of these changes that we're being asked to make. Right?
Wow. So if you're just tuning in, you're locked in, you're listening to Lyte Vibrations here. We're here with Dr. June Samuel talking about the Mental Health and Psychosocial Support Project, which is being sponsored by the Ministry of Health and Social Development, the Pan American Health Organization, and the BVI Health Services Authority. Today, our topic is about, vaccination, COVID-19, and mental anxiety. Now, we spoke, at a length about, the whole pandemic and impact and, effect on how certain persons, have adapted or not to the various changes that were made. Now we have the vaccine that is being administered worldwide. And for a lot of people, they're on that vaccine bandwagon. A lot of people. But then a lot of people are not. And I think this is causing a lot of that anxiety, should I not? Is it something more in the matter? Or can we trust them? It's a lot going on in people's processes as to whether or not they would decide to take this vaccination. Talk a bit about that and the impact it's having.
So, again, vaccines are not new, but vaccines within the current context are new, right? So we're in this pandemic, and we're struggling to come to terms with what that is. And then we say, okay, here's a vaccine that you can take. So obviously, people are going to have concerns, because it's new. It is. We've never had this before, and there's some of us who are naturally suspicious of anything new. There are persons who remember negative experiences that particular populations may have had as out of the whole vaccine history. So all of those things are playing into the vaccine hesitancy that we're seeing, and the reluctance of persons to take the vaccine. I think here in the BVI, a big part of what's playing into that hesitancy is the fact that if you live in the BVI, COVID could not exist, because we don't have any reminders in front of us that says that COVID exists, right? Compared to certain places in the US, you see all the graves lined off, you see the trailers holding the dead bodies. They're reminders. There are more persons who have had that experience. So if you will think to yourself, well, why do I really need to take the vaccine? We've done well, I'm fine, I don't see the benefit to taking this vaccine. And I think that's where persons, quite a number of persons may be sitting. So I think all of those, and of course, we are technology driven people. Everything is on social media, everything is in the news. So every new thing and every conspiracy theory is floating around and we all have access, and that plays into some of what we think about the vaccine, which then affects the decisions that we make. My only advice is you need to get reputable information, because remember that as I tell my son all the time, not everything you see on TV is real, and not everything you read on the internet is true, right? So you have to get to reputable sources of information. You have to get the facts as far as you know it, or we all know it. We have to accept that we don't have full control over every single thing. That's not the way life is. And there are ways that we behave normally in the society, and we don't have full information. We don't have full information about things we eat. We don't have full information about the cars we drive. I mean, there's a lot of inherent assumptions around all of these aspects of our daily lives. So to feel that you are now going to come and control every single aspect about this vaccine, and how it's made and who did what, that is pushing yourself to a place of being irrational, right? And irrationality creates anxiety and fear. Right, so we have to bring it back down. And the most you can do, it's like every other decision you have to make in your life. You have to get all the information, you weigh the risk, you weigh the benefits, and you try to make an informed decision to the best of your ability. That's how we make decisions about everything. Right. So you apply the same rationale to this, and look at the information out there. And try to make the best decision.
Definitely, and I think the reason why a lot of persons are not quickly jumping on board with the vaccine, right, taking the vaccine right now, is because they really don't see the benefit. Because if we're here in this pandemic time, you have to make sure you mask up, stay social distance. God forbid, if you need to leave the island, you gotta go out on a plane or a boat, you come back on a plane, you have to quarantine, you have to do this, you have to spend a lot of money to do what you need to do. But then you take this vaccine, you get your 2 doses, and you still have to go through the same process. You still have to be wearing your mask, you still have to social distance. If you go anywhere, you still have to quarantine, you still have to take 3 or 4 COVID tests to be able to go and come. What is the real benefit? I mean, how does taking this vaccine help you get back to some semblance of normalcy? No. And I think that is the single-handed reason that you don't see people line up in droves coming to take the shot, especially here in the BVI, because at the end of the day, you take the shot and it's still the same. So, I mean, what would you say to that? And I don't know if you can say something that would encourage persons to still do it, despite, this is what it would be for a time.
So when you're dealing with issues of health, responses and outcomes to interventions in health are not quick fixes, right? We have diabetes and hypertension epidemic worldwide and in the BVI. Any interventions that the government applies now, you're not going to see the effect of that intervention now. You're going to see it in 5, 10, 15 years down the road. Okay? Diseases that we use vaccines as a prevention tool, that has been the history, right? Polio, that we know so much about, right? Polio started out as being a public health concern. And then you started vaccinating individuals. And over time, right, we are now at a place, how many years later, where essentially, certainly in the Caribbean and the Americas, polio has been eliminated, right? So none of us can talk to a case of polio because we haven't seen it, right? Same thing with COVID-19. The vaccine is an intervention tool, the effects of which over time, we're looking to see the effects, which eventually we're hoping would be the elimination of the virus or the decrease of the circulating virus to a level that it doesn't cause widespread disease and death like it does now. So everything takes time. It is phases. We started out with public health concerns and lockdowns. That's what we were doing last year. And some countries are now going through that again this year. This phase now is vaccination, okay? And you have to have enough people vaccinated and essentially protected and immune, not just in the BVI, because we don't live in a bubble, but internationally. So we have to get to a certain number of people who are immune before you get to then the next stage, which is being able to move more freely. So it's about phases, right? It's not a quick fix, okay? And the outcomes really depend on how the population behaves and how quickly we are able to implement the vaccine program and get large numbers of people vaccinated. And that's health. I mean, that's not new. You know, we have an issue with cervical cancer in women, okay? We've instituted the HPV vaccine, okay? So we expect over time, and this is not just BVI, but, you know, internationally, over time, it is one of the things that we hope will help to show us a decrease in cervical cancer. Okay?
Yeah, I like that answer, Dr. Samuel.
So did you get a light bulb so you could go for your vaccine soon? Okay.
How you know I haven't taken my vaccine?
Not yet convinced.
You know?
I don't know.
Yeah, man, I like how you answered that. So do you see, in terms of, you know, your projection and the rate we're going now, how much more longer do you think we will be, you know, under this sort of restrictive movement? And
so again, a lot of that depends on the general population behavior, and you see that's why this is a public health concern. So it's not an individual concern anymore, and that is why some of the laws and the rules are made the way they are, because this is not a disease that just affects you or me. It affects nations of people. It affects the whole country. So public health measures, which may seem to be strict, is really for the protection of the population at large. So depending on how we respond, how quickly we get this done, there's now a growing concern in the US about these variants. They're now very concerned because numbers are starting to spike. We normally say when the US sneezes, we catch a cold. So if they get into a variant surge and have pneumonia, we're going to have a problem if we don't have our vaccination down pat. It's just a matter of time. So we really there's an urgency to this that we all need to adopt if we want to get to the next phase, which is, you know, more freedom in movement and a more normal lifestyle.
Wonderful. Today we had Dr. Samuel here in on the hot seat, as you heard. I gave her some hard questions and she handled herself. But Dr. Samuel, you know, when we having fun, that half an hour to go by very quickly. I want you to close us off and, you know, give us some advice for the conspiracy theorists out there who are probably under a lot of pressure and anxiety with regards to this whole COVID situation.
Well, for the conspiracy theory, my response has been, go back and look at the conspiracies that were here last year, this time so, because I remember them well. And I'm not hearing them anymore. So 500,000, a million deaths later, okay, what's the new theory now, right? Because the truth is, you could have conspiracy theories, there's the reality of the situation, and the reality of this situation is that people get sick, people die, okay? And some of us have lost loved ones to COVID-19. Some of us have friends and relatives who've had COVID-19, and they can tell you that it is not a walk in a beautiful park, right? And then there are persons who've had COVID-19 who are continuing even now to live with the effects of COVID-19, because it doesn't just go away. It leaves you with some sort of physical effects, and for some persons, it becomes a disability. So this is not something to be playing around with, okay? And you know, for our future, for the future of the country, for the future of my child, you know, I think it's important for us to step up and do what we need to do. Because if we don't, we're going to be singing a different tune.
Wonderful, wonderful. Right. Once again, you had it like you've been listening to Lyte Vibrations here, bringing to you the Mental Health and Psychosocial Support Project. We have with us today Dr. June Samuel, and like we said, this is, you know, for the next few weeks, we're going to be in here building resilience, building mental capacity. We just want everybody to be mentally well. So join us again this time next week for an exciting new topic as we support resilience and we build mental capacity. I've been your host, Natasha Letson. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for tuning in to Lyte Vibration. And don't forget to tune in this time next week as we continue to bring you life-changing information. Until next time, shine your light.